She came to Italy searching for truth. Instead, she found herself branded a traitor by the most dangerous man in Rome. Adanna never imagined her academic research would lead to a hood over her head, zip ties cutting into her wrists, and a forced marriage to a Mafia kingpin who promised to ruin her. Dante Kang doesn't forgive betrayal, and he believes she destroyed his empire. But when obsession blurs into something darker, when hatred transforms into possession, and when the real enemy emerges from the shadows, their twisted bond becomes the only thing standing between survival and annihilation. This is a story of power, passion, and the fine line between captivity and choice. If you're ready for a romance that will leave you breathless, stay until the end. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories that will consume you. The gunshot echoed through the Archivio di Stato, shattering the silence of centuries-old documents. Adanna Okafor didn't scream. She dropped to the marble floor, her laptop skittering across the polished surface as chaos erupted around her. Another shot, then shouting in rapid Italian. She pressed herself against the base of a reading desk, heart hammering against her ribs, trying to make sense of what was happening. She'd been reviewing shipping manifests from 1943, cross-referencing them with modern organizational structures for her dissertation on power succession in Italian crime families. Dry work. Academic work. The kind of research that was supposed to be safe, buried in dusty archives far removed from the violence she studied theoretically. The third shot shattered a window above her head, raining glass onto her braids. Through the legs of chairs and tables, she saw men in suits firing at uniformed police officers who had stormed the archive. This wasn't random. This was targeted. And somehow, impossibly, it involved her. "Get down!" Someone yelled in English, and strong hands grabbed her shoulders, yanking her backward into a storage alcove. The archivist, Signora Russo, was breathing hard, her wrinkled face pale with terror. "They're here for the files." "Your files?" "What?" "That's impossible. I'm just a researcher." The police received a tip about documents being leaked from this archive. Documents about current trafficking routes disguised as historical shipping records. The old woman's eyes were wild. "They think you're the informant." Adanna's blood went cold. "I would never." "It doesn't matter what you would or wouldn't do, child. It matters what they believe. And if the police believe it, then the families believe it too." Signora Russo pressed a key card into Adanna's palm. "There's a service exit through the conservation lab. Go. Now." Before. The alcove door exploded inward. Two men in expensive suits grabbed Adanna before she could react, hauling her to her feet. One of them, dark-haired, cold-eyed, with a scar bisecting his left eyebrow, spoke into a radio in Italian too fast for her to follow. The other one, broader and younger, zip-tied her wrists with practiced efficiency. "Wait, you don't understand," Adanna said, forcing her voice steady despite the fear clawing up her throat. "I'm an anthropologist. I study historical patterns. I haven't leaked anything to anyone." The scarred man laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "You hear that, Marco? She studies patterns. That's exactly what the boss's shipping schedules are. Patterns." He grabbed her chin, forcing her to meet his eyes. "You cost us 20 men and nearly killed his cousin. The boss wants to ask you some questions personally." "I don't know what you're talking about. Save it for Dante." They dragged her through the archive as the gunfight continued in the main hall. Signora Russo was shouting something, but Adanna couldn't make out the words over the ringing in her ears. They shoved her into a service corridor, then down a flight of stairs she'd never noticed before. A black Mercedes waited in an underground loading bay, engine running. The scarred man, she heard the younger one call him Luca, pushed her head down and forced her into the back seat. Before she could orient herself, a black hood dropped over her head, and the world went dark. The car ride lasted an eternity. Adanna counted turns, trying to maintain some sense of direction, but after the 15th or 20th corner, she gave up. Her anthropology training had prepared her for fieldwork in dangerous places, for navigating complex social hierarchies, for asking the right questions. It hadn't prepared her for being kidnapped by the Mafia. She focused on breathing, on staying calm, on analyzing the situation like she would analyze any cultural phenomenon she was studying. These men believed she had betrayed them. Belief shaped behavior. If she could understand their belief system, she could find a way to communicate her innocence. The car finally stopped, Rough hands pulled her out, and she stumbled on what felt like gravel. The air smelled different here, pine and earth, far from the city. They walked her forward, and she heard the creak of a large door opening. Then carpet under her feet. Marble. The acoustics suggested a large space, high ceilings. When they finally ripped the hood off, Adanna blinked against the sudden light. She stood in an entrance hall that belonged in a museum. Frescoed ceilings, Renaissance paintings, marble columns supporting arched doorways, and standing at the center of it all, backlit by an enormous window overlooking manicured gardens, was the most dangerous-looking man she'd ever seen. Dante Kang was taller than she'd expected, maybe 6'3", with the kind of build that came from actual fighting, not gym posturing. His suit was impeccable, charcoal gray, probably worth more than her entire year's stipend, but it was his face that stopped her breath. Sharp cheekbones, a jaw that could cut glass, and eyes so dark they were almost black. Korean features mixed with something Mediterranean, creating a face that was simultaneously beautiful and terrifying. His black hair was pushed back from his forehead, and a thin scar ran from his temple to his cheekbone. He was studying her with the intensity of a predator, deciding whether its prey was worth the chase. Dr. Adanna Okafor. His voice was smooth, cultured, with a faint Italian accent underlying perfect English. The scholar who destroyed my operation. I didn't destroy anything, Adanna said, keeping her voice level. I don't know what you think I did, but I'm just an anthropologist. I study family structures and power dynamics. I have nothing to do with police operations or... Silence. He didn't raise his voice, but the command in that single word made her jaw snap shut. He moved closer, each step deliberate, until he stood directly in front of her. This close, she could see gold flecks in his dark eyes. Could smell his cologne, something expensive and woody. Do you know what your research did? 20 of my men are in custody. My shipping routes are compromised. My cousin, my blood, is in intensive care because of a police raid that happened because someone leaked precise details about our operations. Details that exactly match the historical patterns you've been documenting for the past 6 months. That's impossible. I never. His hand shot out, gripping her jaw with enough force to hurt. I said silence. You'll speak when I permit it. He tilted her head, examining her face like she was an object, not a person. You're very beautiful for a traitor. I wonder if that's how you convinced the police to protect you. Did you trade information for immunity? Or did you simply enjoy destroying what my family has built? Adanna jerked her chin free from his grip, anger overriding fear. I didn't trade anything because I didn't leak anything. I'm a researcher with Stanford University. I have ethics clearances, institutional oversight, and absolutely no interest in your criminal enterprise beyond academic analysis. If someone used my research to compromise your operations, they did it without my knowledge or consent. For a moment, something flickered in his expression, surprise, maybe at her defiance. Then it hardened again into that terrifying mask of control. Luca! Show her. The scarred man approached with a tablet, pulling up a series of documents. Adanna's breath caught. They were her research notes, pages from her digital files about historical shipping routes, organizational hierarchies, succession patterns. But interspersed with her actual notes were things she'd never written. Coordinates, names, dates, details about current operations that she had absolutely no way of knowing. This is doctored, she said immediately. Someone added information to my files. I never wrote any of this. Convenient. Dante took the tablet, scrolling through the documents. Your university credentials gave you access to archives that most people could never reach. The perfect cover for industrial espionage. I'm not a spy. Then you're catastrophically careless with sensitive information, which is almost worse. He set the tablet down on a marble side table, then circled her slowly like a shark. Here's your situation, Dr. Okafor. The police believe you're an informant because that's what the evidence suggests. My enemies believe the same thing, which means you have approximately 48 hours before a rival family decides to eliminate you to curry favor with me. And I believe you cost me 20 men and nearly killed my cousin, which means I have every reason to make you disappear. Adanna's mouth went dry. So why haven't you? He stopped in front of her again, and something in his expression shifted. It was subtle, A slight narrowing of his eyes, a tension in his jaw, but she'd spent years studying micro-expressions in different cultures. That was calculation. He was working through options. Because, he said slowly, you might still be useful. Your research is extraordinarily detailed, disturbingly so. You understand the structure of organizations like mine better than most people who are born into them. That kind of knowledge could either destroy me further or help me rebuild what was damaged. I won't help you commit crimes. A cold smile touched his lips. You misunderstand. I'm not asking. He gestured to Luca and Marco. Take her to the East Wing. 3rd floor. Make sure she's comfortable. Comfortable. Adanna pulled against their grip as they grabbed her arms. You're keeping me prisoner. Yes. Dante turned away, dismissing her. And if you're very fortunate, it will remain that simple. They dragged her through the mansion, up a sweeping staircase that belonged in a palace, down a hallway lined with artwork that museums would kill to possess. The room they shoved her into was larger than her entire apartment in Palo Alto. 4-poster bed, sitting area with a fireplace, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking gardens that rolled into distant hills. It would have been beautiful if it wasn't a cage. Luca cut the zip ties off her wrists. Bathrooms through there. Clothes in the wardrobe should fit. Dinner is at 8. Don't try the windows. They're alarmed. Don't try the door. It's guarded. Don't try anything clever, because the boss's camera's everywhere, and he's not patient with escape attempts. What happens now? Adanna asked, rubbing her wrists where the ties had cut into her skin. Now you wait until the boss decides what to do with you. Luca paused at the door. For what it's worth, he doesn't usually talk this much with people he plans to kill. So maybe you'll survive this. Then he was gone, and she heard the lock click. Adanna stood in the center of the opulent prison, her mind racing. This was insane. She was an academic, not a criminal. She'd come to Italy to complete her dissertation on power structures in organized crime families, using historical records to understand how these organizations perpetuated themselves across generations. It was theoretical. Safe. She'd never intended to get anywhere near actual criminals. And now she was a prisoner of what appeared to be one of the most powerful mafia bosses in Italy. She moved to the windows, testing them carefully. Luca hadn't lied. The moment she touched the latch, a small red light appeared on the frame. Alarmed. She was 3 floors up anyway, overlooking gardens with armed men patrolling the perimeter. No escape that way. The door was solid wood, professionally installed, with a modern lock that would require tools she didn't have. More guards in the hallway, based on the shadows she could see under the door. Think. She needed to think like a researcher. What did she know about Dante Kang? Not much, actually. The academic literature on current crime families was deliberately vague about specific individuals, focusing instead on structures and patterns. She knew the Kang family controlled significant territory in central Italy, that they'd been founded by a Korean immigrant in the 1970s who'd married into an established Italian family, creating a hybrid organization that bridged Asian and European criminal networks. She knew they specialized in logistics, shipping, transportation, supply chains, which made them invaluable to other criminal organizations. And she knew they were ruthless. Dante himself was an enigma. He'd taken over leadership 5 years ago after his father's death, consolidating power with brutal efficiency. He was educated. She'd seen references to degrees from Oxford and Cambridge, but he'd also personally killed at least 3 rival bosses in territorial disputes. A man who moved between lecture halls and execution chambers with equal facility. Dangerous. Intelligent. Utterly in control. And convinced she'd betrayed him. Adanna sank onto the edge of the enormous bed, forcing herself to breathe. If the files had been doctored, someone had deliberately framed her. But why? What did they gain from making Dante believe an anthropology researcher was an informant? Unless the real informant needed a scapegoat, someone to take the blame while they continued leaking information. Her mind started working through the possibilities, like she was constructing a research hypothesis. If someone inside Dante's organization was actually betraying him, they'd need to divert suspicion. What better way than to frame an outsider who had legitimate access to historical documents? She had the credentials, the access, the paper trail. She was perfect, which meant the real traitor was still out there, still leaking information, still destroying Dante's operation from within. She needed to prove her innocence. But more than that, she needed to identify the actual mole. Because if she didn't, Dante would never believe her, and she'd remain a prisoner, or worse, for the rest of her considerably shortened life. The problem was access. She needed her laptop, her research files, the ability to analyze the doctor documents and find inconsistencies. She needed to understand Dante's organization well enough to identify who could have planted false information in her files. She needed to convince the most dangerous man in Italy to trust her. A knock at the door interrupted her spiraling thoughts. A young woman entered, dark-haired and wary, carrying a tray of food. "Signor Dante says you should eat. Dinner is at 8, but he thought you might be hungry now." "What's your name?" Adanna asked. The girl hesitated. "Sophia. Sophia, I need you to understand something. I'm not who Signor Dante thinks I am. I'm not a spy or an informant. I'm a researcher, and someone framed me to protect themselves. Can you help me?" Sophia set the tray down quickly, not meeting Adanna's eyes. "I can't help you. No one can help you. Just eat, be polite at dinner, and maybe he'll let you leave eventually. That's the best advice I can give." She hurried out before Adanna could say anything else. So much for allies. Adanna picked at the food, pasta, salad, bread that smelled freshly baked, but her appetite was gone. She spent the next few hours examining every inch of the room, looking for anything useful. Nothing. Whoever had prepared this space had done it with the explicit purpose of making escape impossible. At 7:30, Sophia returned with clothes. "For dinner, Signor Dante expects you to dress appropriately." The dress was simple but elegant, black, well-cut, modest without being prudish. Adanna changed mechanically, her mind still working through scenarios. The clothes fit perfectly, which meant Dante had known her measurements. Had probably known everything about her before his men grabbed her from the archive. That level of preparation was either impressive or terrifying. Probably both. At precisely 8 o'clock, Luca appeared at her door. "Time to go." He led her back through the mansion, down to the ground floor, into a formal dining room that was somehow even more intimidating than the rest of the house. A table that could seat 20, set for 2. Crystal chandeliers, more paintings that belonged in the Uffizi. And at the head of the table, Dante Kang, now dressed in a black shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, revealing forearms corded with muscle. He stood when she entered, a gesture of courtesy that seemed absurd given the circumstances. "Dr. Okafor, please sit." Adanna sat at the chair Luca pulled out for her, 3 seats down from Dante. Close enough to converse, far enough to maintain distance. She watched as servants appeared with the first course, some kind of soup that smelled of truffle and cream. "Are you going to drug me?" she asked. Dante's eyebrow lifted slightly. "If I wanted to drug you, I would have done it hours ago. The food is safe. I prefer my enemies conscious for conversations." "I'm not your enemy. That remains to be determined." He started eating, and after a moment, Adanna did too. The soup was extraordinary, which somehow made the whole situation more surreal. She was eating a Michelin star meal with a man who might kill her before dessert. "Tell me about your research," Dante said after a few minutes of silence. "Why organized crime families?" "Because they're fascinating." The answer came automatically, the same explanation she'd given 100 times at conferences and dinners. Most institutions fail within a generation or two. Crime families persist across centuries. They adapt, evolve, survive regime changes and law enforcement pressure and internal conflicts. Understanding how they maintain cohesion and transfer power is valuable not just for criminology, but for organizational theory, anthropology, even political science. You study us like we're animals in a zoo. I study you like you're humans with complex social structures. There's a difference. She met his gaze directly. "You want to know what I've learned? Crime families succeed because they're better at succession planning than most corporations. They balance tradition with innovation. They create loyalty through both fear and genuine care for members. They're incredibly efficient at resource allocation and risk management. In many ways, you're more sophisticated than legitimate businesses." Something shifted in his expression. "Interest, maybe. And yet you helped the police destroy what we've built." "I didn't." She set down her spoon, abandoning any pretense of eating. "But someone did. Someone with access to my files. Someone who could plant information that looked authentic enough to fool both you and law enforcement. Someone who benefits from chaos in your organization. You think there's a traitor in my family. I think there's a traitor who used me as a scapegoat. And until you find them, your operation will keep hemorrhaging. The raids won't stop. The leaks won't stop. Your enemies will keep getting stronger while you waste time and resources on the wrong target. Dante leaned back in his chair, studying her with that unsettling intensity. You're very confident for someone in your position. I'm very desperate to survive. Confidence is all I have. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. I like that. Honesty. It's refreshing. He gestured, and the servants cleared the soup, bringing the next course. Some kind of fish with vegetables that looked like art. Let's say I believe you. Hypothetically, how would you prove your innocence? Give me access to the doctored files and to your organization's communication records. Let me analyze the patterns. Whoever planted the false information had to access my research files. That leaves a digital trail. And whoever actually leaked your operational details had to communicate with law enforcement. That leaves another trail. I can find the connections. You want me to give you access to my organization's inner workings while you're potentially a spy. You want me to prove I'm not a spy without access to evidence. We're at an impasse. He considered this while eating his fish with precise, elegant movements. Everything about him was controlled, measured. Here's my problem, Dr. Okafor. Even if I believed you were innocent, your research represents a massive security risk. You know too much about how we operate. That information, in the wrong hands, could destroy what remains of my family's business. So what are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that you present a unique problem that requires a unique solution. He set down his fork and fixed her with a look that made her stomach drop. You're too dangerous to release and too potentially valuable to kill, which leaves very few options. Prison. You could just keep me here. That would require significant resources for an indefinite period. Guards. Surveillance. The constant risk that you'd escape or be extracted by rival families or law enforcement. It's inefficient. He paused. No, I need something more binding. Something that gives me legal authority over your movements and prevents you from testifying against me in any court. Adanna's blood went cold as she understood where this was going. No. Marriage would solve multiple problems. As my wife, you'd have spousal immunity. You couldn't be compelled to testify. Your movements would be restricted by cultural and legal expectations. And if you proved useful, I'd have immediate access to your expertise. He said it so casually, like he was discussing a business merger, not her entire life. It's the most practical solution. You're insane. I won't marry you. Then you'll die. He said it without inflection, without emotion. Simple fact. Because those are your only options, Dr. Okafor. Marry me and live, possibly even prove your innocence and eventually earn your freedom. Or refuse and disappear. Permanently. This is barbaric. You can't just force someone to marry you. I can do whatever is necessary to protect my family. And right now, neutralizing you is necessary. He stood, moving around the table until he loomed over her chair. I'll give you until morning to decide. But understand this, if you choose marriage, it will be real in every legal sense. You'll take my name. You'll live in my house. You'll be bound to me by law and by expectation. And I promise you, Dr. Okafor, I will make sure you remember this choice for the rest of your life. The threat in those words was clear. He wasn't offering protection or partnership. He was offering ownership. Why? Adanna demanded, tilting her head back to meet his eyes. If you're so convinced I betrayed you, why not just kill me? Why this elaborate solution? For a moment, something raw flickered across his face. Rage. Maybe or pain. Because my cousin is in intensive care, fighting for his life, and I need to know exactly who put him there. Because 20 of my men trusted me to protect them, and they're in custody. Because someone made a fool of me, and I will find them and make them pay. And if there's even a 1% chance that you're innocent, that you can help me find the real traitor, then keeping you alive and under my control is worth the inconvenience of a forced marriage. And if I prove my innocence, what then? Then we'll revisit the terms of our arrangement. He returned to his seat, dismissing the emotional moment as if it had never happened. But first, You have to survive long enough to prove anything. And that requires choosing life over pride. Adanna sat in silence for the rest of the meal, her mind spinning. This was impossible. Insane. She couldn't marry a crime boss just to survive. Could she? But the alternative was death. Certain, immediate death. And if she was alive, she had a chance. A chance to prove her innocence. A chance to find the real traitor. A chance to escape eventually. All she had to do was sell herself to the devil sitting across from her. After dinner, Luca escorted her back to her room. Adanna didn't sleep. She paced. She tried the windows again, knowing it was futile. She analyzed her options from every angle, using every research methodology she'd ever learned. And by morning, she'd reached a conclusion. When Dante entered her room at dawn, not knocking, just walking in like he owned the place, which he did, she was sitting in the chair by the window, already dressed in the clothes Sophia had brought. "I have conditions," Adanna said before he could speak. He raised an eyebrow. "You are in no position to negotiate. If you want me to agree to this, you'll listen to my conditions. Otherwise, you might as well kill me now, because I won't be any use to you if I'm broken." He studied her for a long moment, then gestured for her to continue. "First, I want access to my research files and to whatever evidence you have about the leaks. If I'm going to prove my innocence, I need data. Second, I want protection from your enemies. If we're married, they'll target me to get to you. Third, when I prove who the real traitor is, not if, when, you'll grant me an annulment and let me leave. No conditions, no threats, no revenge. Anything else? Yes. You don't touch me. This is a legal arrangement, nothing more. You want control over my testimony and my movements, fine. But you don't get my body." Something dark flashed in his eyes. "I told you last night, if you choose this, it will be real. That includes all aspects of marriage. Then we have no deal." They stared at each other, wills clashing. Adanna forced herself not to look away, not to show fear. She'd spent years interviewing dangerous people, navigating hostile environments. She knew how to hold her ground. Finally, Dante smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. "Fine. I won't force myself on you. But understand, Dr. Okafor, if you eventually come to me willingly, and you will, I won't show the same restraint. I will ruin you for any other man. You'll remember you were mine long after you forget why." The promise in those words sent a shiver down her spine. Not entirely from fear. "So we have a deal," she pressed. "We have a deal. For now." He pulled something from his pocket. A small velvet box. Inside was a ring. Platinum with a single enormous diamond, surrounded by smaller stones. It was beautiful and ostentatious, and worth more than she'd earn in a decade. "We'll be married this afternoon. A priest will come here. The ceremony will be private but legal. Afterward, you'll have access to a secure workstation with the files you requested. You'll have 1 month to find evidence of the real traitor. If you succeed, we'll discuss annulment. If you fail," he left the thread hanging, "and if something happens to me in that month, if your enemies get to me, then I'll slaughter everyone responsible and burn their organization to the ground." He said it with such casual certainty that she believed him. "You're under my protection now, Dr. Okafor. That means something in my world." He held out the ring. Adanna took it with shaking hands and slid it onto her finger. It fit perfectly. Of course it did. He'd planned this. "Welcome to the family," Dante said. Then he turned and left, leaving her alone with the weight of what she'd just agreed to. 4 hours later, Adanna stood in a small chapel in the mansion's east wing, wearing a white dress she hadn't chosen, speaking vows she didn't mean to a man who terrified her. The priest looked uncomfortable, but completed the ceremony with professional efficiency. Luca and Marco served as witnesses, their expressions carefully neutral. When Dante slid a matching platinum band onto her finger and the priest pronounced them married, Adanna felt the trap close around her. "You may kiss the bride," the priest said. Dante leaned close, his breath warm against her ear. "This is the last kindness I'll show you, Dr. Okafor. After this, everything you receive, you'll have to earn." Then he pressed his lips to her forehead, chaste, almost brotherly, and stepped back. The ceremony was over. She was married to a monster, and her real survival had just begun. If you're captivated by Adanna and Dante's dangerous game, don't forget to like this video, Drop a comment with your thoughts on this twisted marriage, and subscribe for the next part where obsession and truth collide in ways neither of them expect. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next.